A Journey from Darkness to Light. Chapter 1. Born into shadows. The night Patrick was born, the midwife's face fell. Margaret, exhausted from labor, reached for her newborn son with trembling hands, but the silence in the room spoke volumes. Her baby was healthy, crying lustily, with all 10 fingers and toes, but his skin was dark. Darker than anyone in the family had ever been. "He's beautiful," Margaret whispered, tears streaming down her face. Knowing the battle her son would face in a world that measured worth by the lightness of one's complexion, her husband held the baby awkwardly, his disappointment barely concealed. "He'll grow lighter," he muttered, a hope that would never materialize. Patrick's childhood was a series of small cruelties that accumulated into profound wounds. Family gatherings were torture. Aunts would coo over Maria, his younger sister, praising her fair skin and delicate features, while barely acknowledging Patrick's presence. "What happened to this one?" they would whisper, not quietly enough. "Must be from his father's side." At school, it was worse. Children were cruel in their honesty. Blackie, they called him. Charcoal, Midnight, the names evolved, but the intent remained the same: to remind him that he was different, lesser, unwanted. Teachers, though more subtle, betrayed their prejudices in small ways. They seemed surprised when he answered questions correctly, as if intelligence and dark skin couldn't coexist. Patrick learned to make himself small, invisible. He sat in the back of classrooms, spoke only when called upon, and avoided eye contact. But his mind was vast and hungry. While other children played cricket in the streets, Patrick devoured books. Literature became his escape, poetry his voice. In the privacy of his room, he wrote verses that captured everything he couldn't say aloud: the pain of being seen yet unseen, the loneliness of being present yet absent, the agony of having so much to offer a world that refused to look. His father died when Patrick was 12. A sudden heart attack that left the family financially devastated. Margaret took on sewing work, her fingers bleeding from endless hours at the machine. Patrick watched his mother sacrifice everything, aging prematurely from stress and exhaustion. He vowed to escape this life, to become someone who could protect her, provide for her, give her the comfort she deserved. Education became his obsession. He studied with ferocious intensity, waking at 4 in the morning to read by candlelight before school, staying up past midnight to complete assignments. His grades were impeccable, his discipline unmatched. When he secured admission to university on full scholarship, Margaret wept with pride. For one brief moment, Patrick allowed himself to hope that things might be different. Chapter 2. University Hope and Heartbreak. The university campus sprawled like a small city, its old buildings covered in ivy, its lawns manicured and green. Patrick walked through the gates carrying a single worn suitcase, his heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and dread. Here, he thought, merit would matter. Here, his mind would be valued over his appearance. The first week shattered that illusion. During orientation, he watched as groups formed naturally: the wealthy kids, gravitating toward each other, the attractive ones forming their own circles. Patrick stood alone, his dark skin and shabby clothes marking him as an outsider. He found a seat in the back of the lecture hall, a position that would become his default throughout university. Then Shane appeared. Tall, handsome, with an easy smile and natural charm. Shane was everything Patrick wasn't. He could have befriended anyone, yet he chose to sit next to Patrick in economics class. "This seat taken?" he asked, though dozens of empty seats surrounded them. Patrick shook his head, suspicious of this attention. But Shane was genuine. He borrowed Patrick's notes, praised his insights, and gradually drew him into conversation. "You're brilliant, man," Shane said, after Patrick explained a complex economic theory. "Why do you hide in the back?" Patrick didn't answer, but Shane understood. Over weeks, they became inseparable. Shane introduced Patrick to the cafeteria, the library's hidden corners, the best spots on campus. He defended Patrick when others made cruel remarks, though Patrick wished he wouldn't. It only drew more attention to his difference. Literature class changed everything. Professor Morrison was discussing romantic poetry when she walked in, late, apologizing breathlessly. Natalie. Her name was Natalie, and she was the most beautiful person Patrick had ever seen. Long, dark hair, expressive eyes, and a smile that could illuminate the dullest lecture. She took a seat in the front row, and Patrick's world tilted on its axis. He fell completely, hopelessly in love. Every class became an opportunity to watch her, to memorize the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when concentrating, the melody of her laugh, the grace of her movements. He wrote poetry about her, pages and pages of verses that captured his longing, his admiration, his complete devotion to someone who didn't know he existed. Shane noticed immediately. "Talk to her," he urged. "What's the worst that could happen?" Patrick knew exactly what could happen. He had learned that lesson repeatedly throughout his life. People like Natalie didn't fall for people like him. She lived in a world of light. He dwelled in shadows. The distance between them was insurmountable. Still, he found ways to be near her. When she struggled with an assignment, Patrick solved it and passed it to Shane, who gave it to Natalie as his own work. When she mentioned needing notes from a missed lecture, Patrick meticulously compiled them, again through Shane as intermediary. He was content to help her from the shadows, to exist in her orbit, even if she never saw him. One day, emboldened by Shane's encouragement and his own desperate longing, Patrick decided to approach her. He practiced what he would say, wrote and rewrote a small note expressing his feelings through poetry. His hands trembled as he walked toward her after class, the note folded in his pocket. But before he could reach her, he saw them. Natalie was laughing, looking up at a tall, handsome classmate named Christopher. The way she looked at him, Patrick had written poems about that exact expression, imagining it directed at him. Christopher leaned in, whispered something, and Natalie blushed, smiling. Patrick turned away, the note burning like shame in his pocket. Over the following weeks, he watched their romance blossom. Christopher was everything Patrick wasn't: confident, attractive, from a good family. They were a perfect couple, the kind people smiled at when they walked past. Patrick's poems became darker, filled with pain and resignation. Shane tried to console him, but what comfort was there? Patrick had known from the beginning how this would end. He had been foolish to hope otherwise. The semester continued. Patrick buried himself in studies, graduating top of his class in every subject. But academic success felt hollow. What good was intelligence when the world judged by appearance? What value did achievement have when the person you loved didn't know your name? Graduation day arrived. Patrick sat in the crowd, watching Natalie accept her degree, her family cheering, Christopher beside her with an engagement ring ready. Shane gave a speech as class president, thanking professors and celebrating futures. Patrick clapped mechanically, feeling nothing. After the ceremony, Shane hugged him tightly. "I'm moving to the capital," he said. "My father got me a position at his firm. Come with me. We'll conquer the world together." But Patrick couldn't leave. Margaret's health was failing, medical bills were mounting, and Maria needed money for her wedding. Shane left with promises to stay in touch. Promises they both knew would fade with distance. Patrick returned home, a degree in hand that seemed worthless, to face a future that looked as bleak as his past. Chapter 3. The singer's night watchman. Months passed in desperate job searching. Patrick applied to dozens of positions, each rejection another confirmation of his unworthiness. Companies wanted personality, presentation skills, client-facing abilities, coded language for appearance. His qualifications didn't matter. In interviews, he could see it in their eyes the moment they decided he wasn't suitable, wasn't what they wanted representing their organization. Margaret's condition worsened. She needed expensive medications, regular doctor visits. Maria's wedding was approaching, and tradition demanded the family provide her dowry. The weight of responsibility crushed Patrick. He took whatever work he could find, tutoring ungrateful children whose parents looked at him with suspicion. Data entry jobs that paid barely enough to survive. Then he saw the advertisement. Night watchman needed immediate start, good pay. The address was in the wealthy part of town, a mansion belonging to Laura Westwood, the famous singer. Patrick had heard her songs on the radio, soulful, melancholic ballads about love and loss. He never imagined he'd work for her. The interview was brief. Laura's manager, a harried man named George, looked Patrick up and down. "You'll work nights, 9 p.m. to 6 a.m., watch the property. Make sure no one breaks in. Laura has fans who sometimes get enthusiastic. Can you handle that?" Patrick nodded. He could handle anything if it paid. The mansion was overwhelming, 3 stories of marble and glass, with a swimming pool, gardens, and a recording studio. Patrick's entire house could fit in Laura's garage. He arrived for his first shift feeling small and out of place, wearing his only decent clothes, carrying a flashlight and his ever-present notebook of poetry. The first week was uneventful. He walked the perimeter, checked doors and windows, and sat in the guardhouse reading. Laura came and went at odd hours, usually with an entourage, musicians, producers, hangers-on. She never acknowledged him, which was fine. Patrick had learned to be invisible. The second week, everything changed. It was 3 in the morning, silent except for crickets and distant traffic. Patrick sat under a garden light, writing poetry, lost in verses about loneliness and longing. He didn't hear her approach until she spoke. "What are you writing?" Laura's voice made him jump. She stood a few feet away, wrapped in a silk robe, her famous face bare of makeup, looking tired and somehow vulnerable. "Just nothing, ma'am." "Sorry, I should be patrolling." "Read it to me," she interrupted, sitting on the garden bench. "Please." Patrick hesitated, but something in her expression, a desperate sort of curiosity, made him comply. He read a recent poem about being a shadow in a world of light, about loving beauty from a distance, about the peculiar pain of being simultaneously visible and invisible. Laura listened, her eyes closed. When he finished, silence stretched between them. Then she spoke, her voice thick with emotion. "That's the most honest thing I've heard in years. Who are you?" "Patrick, ma'am. I'm just the watchman." "No," she said firmly. "You're a poet. A real one. Not like the pretentious hacks who write my lyrics." She stood abruptly. "Come to the studio tomorrow night. I want you to meet Nathan." Nathan Monroe was Laura's music director, a talented musician with an ego to match. When Laura introduced Patrick the next evening, Nathan barely glanced at him. "Laura, I don't have time for your charity cases, read your poetry," Laura told Patrick, ignoring Nathan's protests. Patrick read 3 poems. The room fell silent. Nathan's expression shifted from dismissive to intrigued. "Okay," he admitted grudgingly. "That's actually good. Raw, real, the kind of thing that could make a hit if we set it to the right music." Over the following months, Patrick's life transformed. His poetry became Laura's songs. They weren't just hits, they were phenomena. People related to the themes of longing, rejection, and finding beauty in darkness. Laura's career, which had been declining, surged back to life. Her concerts sold out. Her albums topped charts, but success brought complications. Nathan grew increasingly resentful. He was the famous music director, yet everyone praised the lyrics, Patrick's lyrics. Nathan began taking credit for polishing Patrick's work, then for co-writing, and eventually for inspiring the poetry. Patrick watched this theft silently, unsure how to fight back without risking everything. Laura tried to protect him, but she had her own battles. Patrick gradually realized that beneath the glamour, Laura was deeply troubled. She drank too much, relied on pills to sleep, to wake, to function. Her entourage enabled her addictions, more interested in their own access to fame than her well-being. One night, Patrick found Laura unconscious by the pool, an empty pill bottle nearby. He called for help, stayed with her through the ambulance ride, the hospital. "Wait." When she woke, she looked at him with tears streaming down her face. "Why do you care?" she whispered. "No one else does." "Because you saw me," Patrick answered simply. When no one else did. Chapter 4. Bella, the kindred spirit. During his time with Laura, Patrick met Bella. She appeared one night at one of Laura's parties, though she wasn't really a guest. Bella worked in what people politely called entertainment. She sold companionship, her body, whatever men would pay for. The party guests treated her with thinly veiled contempt, using her services while despising her for providing them. Patrick found her crying in the garden, mascara running down her face. Sorry, she said, trying to pull herself together. I'll leave. You don't have to, Patrick said, offering her his handkerchief. They talked through the night. Bella's story was heartbreaking: a poor family, an abusive father, running away at 16 with nowhere to go. She had survived the only way she knew how. Society judged her, condemned her. But Patrick saw what others missed: her kindness, her fierce intelligence, her desperate desire for a different life. They became unlikely friends. Bella would visit sometimes, and they'd sit in the garden talking about dreams and impossibilities. She told him about the men who used her, the women who scorned her, the life she wished she could escape. Patrick shared his poetry, his own stories of rejection and longing. Bella fell in love with him. How could she not? He was the first man who had treated her with genuine respect, who saw her as a human being rather than an object. One night, she confessed her feelings, her voice trembling with hope and fear. Patrick felt his heart break. He cared for Bella deeply, but not in the way she needed. His heart was still wounded from Natalie, still building walls against further pain. I'm sorry, he said gently. You deserve someone who can love you completely. I'm too broken for that. Bella nodded, tears falling silently. I understand. You can't help who you love or don't love. She kissed his cheek. Thank you for being kind to me. No one else ever was. 2 weeks later, Bella disappeared. Patrick heard later that she'd moved to another city, starting fresh. He hoped she found the happiness she deserved, even as he mourned the loss of one of the few people who had truly understood him. Laura's decline accelerated. Her addictions worsened, her performances became erratic. Nathan, sensing the ship was sinking, jumped to a rival label, taking credit for Laura's recent successes. The mansion grew quieter, the party stopped. One morning, Patrick arrived to find the gates locked, a notice of foreclosure posted. Laura had checked into rehab. George informed him tersely. The house was being sold to pay debts. Patrick's services were no longer needed. Just like that, he was unemployed again, back to square one, with nothing but a notebook of poetry and the bitter knowledge that success, when built on someone else's platform, could disappear overnight. Chapter 5. Benjamin Carter's world. Patrick was applying for jobs, facing the same rejections, when fate intervened. Laura, now sober and trying to rebuild her life, remembered his kindness. She made a call to Benjamin Carter, a business tycoon she'd once performed for. I know someone exceptional, she told him. Give him a chance. You won't regret it. Benjamin agreed to an interview as a favor to Laura. Patrick arrived at Carter Industries' gleaming headquarters feeling completely out of place. The lobby was all marble and glass, filled with confident people in expensive suits who looked right through him. Benjamin's office occupied the entire top floor. The man himself was in his 60s, gray-haired and sharp-eyed, with the bearing of someone accustomed to absolute authority. He studied Patrick with unsettling intensity. Laura says you're brilliant, Benjamin said. Prove it. For the next hour, Benjamin peppered Patrick with questions about business, economics, strategy, human nature. Patrick answered honestly, drawing on his education and his years of observing people from the margins. He had learned to see what others missed, to understand motivations and patterns that the privileged overlooked. Benjamin leaned back, a small smile on his face. You're hired. Start as my personal assistant. We'll see where you go from there. Patrick couldn't believe it. A real position, in a major corporation, with the salary to finally help his mother and sister properly. It felt like a dream, which made him nervous as dreams had a habit of turning into nightmares. Carter Industries was a maze of politics and power plays. Benjamin's son, Stephen, was immediately hostile. Stephen was in his 30s, handsome and entitled, groomed to inherit his father's empire, but lacking the intelligence or work ethic to deserve it. He saw Patrick as a threat, this nobody from nowhere who had somehow gained Benjamin's attention. Stephen made Patrick's life miserable in petty ways. He'd forget to include Patrick in important meetings, then blame him for not being informed. He'd give Patrick impossible tasks with unreasonable deadlines, hoping to see him fail. He mocked Patrick's appearance in front of other employees, encouraging them to join in, but Patrick endured. He worked harder than anyone else, arrived earlier, stayed later, and produced results that were undeniable. Benjamin increasingly relied on him, valuing his insights and dedication. Patrick was given more responsibility, more authority, until he was effectively Benjamin's right hand, making decisions that affected the entire company. Then there was Emma. Benjamin's daughter was 28. Beautiful in that effortless way wealthy people achieved: good nutrition, personal trainers, expensive clothes. She was engaged to Richard Pemberton, heir to another business empire, in a marriage that was more corporate merger than love match. Emma first noticed Patrick during a family dinner at Benjamin's mansion. Patrick was there to present a business proposal, standing awkwardly in the elegant dining room while the Carter family ate. Emma saw him differently than others did, not as the dark-skinned assistant her father kept around, but as someone deeply intelligent and mysteriously sad. She began seeking him out, asking his opinion on books, discussing business strategies, sharing her own frustrations about her controlled life. Patrick tried to maintain professional distance, but Emma was persistent, breaking through his defenses with her genuine curiosity and kindness. Their conversations grew longer, more personal. Emma confessed her misery about her engagement, about feeling like a chess piece in her father's business games. Patrick shared his poetry, something he'd shown no one since his university days. Emma read his verses with tears in her eyes, understanding the pain behind every word. They fell in love slowly, then all at once. It was impossible, wrong, doomed from the start, yet neither could stop it. Patrick knew he should leave, that nothing good could come from this. But for the first time since Natalie, he allowed himself to feel, to hope, to imagine a future that included being loved by someone he loved in return. Chapter 6. The Falthier Secret couldn't last. Richard grew suspicious of Emma's distracted behavior. Stephen, always watching for ways to destroy Patrick, noticed the glances exchanged between Emma and Patrick, the way they disappear at the same time during events. Stephen crafted his trap carefully. He created a scenario involving a major business deal, manipulating documents to make it appear that Patrick was feeding confidential information to competitors. The evidence was circumstantial but damaging: unexplained meetings, suspicious transactions that Stephen had orchestrated but linked to Patrick. Benjamin called Patrick to his office, his face cold. "I trusted you," he said, laying out the evidence. "I gave you everything, and this is how you repay me." Patrick tried to explain, to defend himself, but he had no proof of his innocence. Stephen had been thorough. Worse, when Emma tried to intervene, running to her father's office, her emotional defense of Patrick only confirmed suspicions that something inappropriate was happening between them. "Did you seduce my daughter?" Benjamin asked, his voice deadly quiet. "No," Patrick said firmly. "I would never. Emma and we're just friends." But the way he said her name betrayed him. Benjamin saw the truth, and his face darkened with rage. "You're fired. Get out of my building, out of my sight. If I ever see you near my daughter again, I'll destroy you." Security escorted Patrick from the building like a criminal. Employees he'd worked with for 3 years looked away, embarrassed or gleeful, depending on their allegiance. Outside, Emma was waiting, tears streaming down her face. "Run away with me," she begged. "We can go somewhere they'll never find us. I don't care about money or status. I just want to be with you." Patrick held her face in his hands, memorizing every detail. "I can't let you sacrifice everything for me. Your family, your future, your life. I won't let you throw it away. You think you can handle society's judgment, but you don't know what it's really like. I do. I've lived it my entire life. I won't condemn you to that. I don't care, but I do," Patrick said, his voice breaking. "I love you too much to ruin your life." He kissed her forehead, then walked away, each step agony, ignoring her calls for him to come back. The business community believed the worst. Doors closed, opportunities vanished. Patrick was blacklisted, his reputation destroyed. He returned home to find his mother's health had deteriorated severely. Maria was married now, busy with her own family. Patrick was alone, broke and broken, with nowhere left to fall. Chapter 7. Gabriel the teacher. Patrick spent weeks in despair, barely leaving his room. He'd failed at everything: love, career, itself. The darkness he'd been born into seemed to have reclaimed him completely. One night, desperate for escape, he packed a small bag and left the city. Wandering without destination or purpose, he ended up in a remote area, mountains and valleys, far from civilization. Exhausted and defeated, he collapsed by a stream, ready to give up entirely. That's where Gabriel found him. Gabriel was unlike anyone Patrick had met. He lived in a simple house on the mountainside, far from society's chaos. He was perhaps 60, with calm eyes and an aura of unshakable peace. He took Patrick in without questions, offering food, shelter, and most importantly, silence. For days, Patrick said nothing. Gabriel didn't push, simply going about his routines, tending his garden, meditating, preparing meals. Slowly, Patrick began to heal, the silence and simplicity acting like balm on his wounded soul. When Patrick finally spoke, telling his story, Gabriel listened without judgment. "You've been seeking validation from a world that can never give it," Gabriel said simply. "You've measured your worth by their standards. That's your mistake. What other standards are there?" Patrick asked bitterly. "The world is what it is. The world is what you make of it," Gabriel countered. "You've spent your life reacting to others' perceptions. It's time to act according to your own vision." For the following months, Gabriel became Patrick's mentor. But he didn't teach spirituality or meditation. He taught business, strategy, and power. Gabriel had been a successful entrepreneur before retiring to the mountains. He had connections, knowledge, and insights that he shared with Patrick. "Your experiences are your advantage," Gabriel explained. "You understand rejection, discrimination, pain. You see beneath surfaces, understand motivations others miss. Most successful people are blind to the struggles of ordinary people. You're not. That's your edge." Gabriel taught Patrick about investments, real estate, market psychology. He introduced him to contacts, people who owed Gabriel favors, who would give Patrick opportunities without the usual prejudices. But more than tactics, Gabriel taught Patrick confidence, not the hollow bravado of insecurity, but genuine self-assurance rooted in skill and knowledge. "Money is just a tool," Gabriel said. "Power is just a means. What matters is what you build with them. Will you use success for revenge or transformation? Will you become like those who hurt you, or will you be better?" Patrick spent a year with Gabriel, absorbing everything, transforming himself from the inside out. When he left, he wasn't the broken man who had arrived. He was someone with purpose, vision, and determination. He returned to the city, not to reclaim his old life, but to build something entirely new. Chapter 8. The Strategic Rise. Patrick started small. Using the modest savings he'd accumulated and a loan from one of Gabriel's contacts, he invested in real estate. But not the glamorous properties that attracted wealthy investors. Patrick focused on affordable housing in developing areas. He had studied demographic patterns, infrastructure plans, economic trends. He knew which neighborhoods would transform in the next 5 years. His first project was a small apartment complex in an overlooked district. While developers fought over prime locations, Patrick purchased land cheaply, built efficiently, and offered units at prices middle-class families could afford. When a new highway was announced, connecting his area to the commercial center, property values soared. Patrick sold at significant profit. He reinvested immediately, diversifying. Manufacturing companies struggling due to poor management caught his attention. Patrick acquired them at low prices, streamlined operations, treated workers fairly, and turned them profitable. Unlike traditional businessmen who slashed wages and exploited employees, Patrick understood that loyal, well-paid workers were more productive. His companies became known for fair practices, attracting the best talent. Patrick invested in technology startups that others dismissed, apps for blue-collar workers, platforms connecting small businesses, services targeting markets that wealthy investors ignored. His understanding of ordinary people's needs gave him an edge. While venture capitalists chased flashy concepts, Patrick funded practical solutions that gained massive user bases. Within 3 years, Patrick was a millionaire. Within 5, he had diversified into media, purchasing struggling publications and production houses. He understood content in ways traditional media moguls didn't. He knew what resonated with audiences because he'd been part of those audiences. Invisible and ignored. His business philosophy was revolutionary. He implemented blind hiring processes where candidates were evaluated purely on skills. He mandated equal pay for equal work. He created mentorship programs for talented individuals from disadvantaged backgrounds. Critics said he was too idealistic, that his approach would fail. Instead, his companies thrived, proving that ethics and profits weren't mutually exclusive. Patrick established the Margaret Foundation, named after his mother, who had passed away peacefully, having seen her son's remarkable transformation. The foundation provided scholarships, built schools, funded medical facilities in underserved areas. Patrick understood poverty's grinding reality. He'd lived it. His philanthropy wasn't performative charity, but systematic change.